The great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. The more, therefore, you relinquish power, trust others, the more powerful you become, but in such a way that instead of having to lie awake nights controlling everything, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else. And they carry it on for you. So you can go to sleep at night and trust your nervous system to wake you up in the morning. You can even tell it, I want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and it'll wake you up just like an alarm clock. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole of the rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it and antagonize it and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another, and say, let's see what you're going to do. But in doing that, you see, in saying that to everything else that you have been taught to think is not you, you are also saying it to yourself. Because finally, as I pointed out, you do not know where your decisions come from. They pop up like hiccups. And when you make a decision, people have a great deal of anxiety about making decisions. There's this guy farmer, who ordered a help man come in, and found he was an extraordinarily efficient worker, because the first day he put him on sawing logs. And he sawed more logs than anybody had ever sawed. It was fantastic. But it was all done in one day. So the next day he put him on to mending fences. And there were all kinds of broken fences around the farm, and in one day he had the whole thing done. So he thought, what am I going to do with this guy? So he took him down into a basement and said, look, here are all the potatoes that have come in from this harvest. And I want you to sort them into 3 groups. Those that we sell, those that we use for seeding, and those that we throw away. So he left him at that. At the end of the day, the laborer came back and said, well, that's enough, mister. I quit. Oh, he said, you can't quit. I've never had such an excellent worker. I'll raise your salary. I'll do anything to keep you around here. I said, no. It's all right mending fences and chopping wood, but this potato business is decision after decision after decision after decision. So when we decide, we're always worrying, did I think this over long enough? Did I take enough data into consideration? And if you think it through, you find you never could take enough data into consideration. The data for a decision in any given situation is infinite. So what you do is, you go through the motions of thinking out what you will do about this. And then when the time comes to act, you make a snap judgment. I mean, I'm speaking a little extremely, making some fun of it and so on, because after all, we do occasionally get the vague outlines of things and make a right decision on rational grounds. But we fortunately forget the variables that could have interfered with this coming out right. It's amazing how often it works. But warriors are people who think of all the variables beyond their control and what might happen. So then when you make a decision, and it works out all right, I think very little of it has much to do with your conscious intent and control. But somehow or other, you are able to decide and control things more harmoniously if you delegate authority. That's why very great businessmen are those who can delegate authority, trust others to work for them, because those are people developing businesses on the same basic structure that is fundamental to a living organism: delegation of authority. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And you see, then, what is happening is this: the more you let go of it and trust it, as if it were quite other than you, the more you realize the inseparable identity of self and other. To go back, if you try to find the identity of self and other by subjecting other to self, no go. If, on the other hand, you find it through giving self, that is control, over to other and trusting that, you may make a mistake. You may make a bad gamble. But in the long run, you're acting on a principle which has the backing of evolution. This is the way biological evolution goes on. Constant delegation of authority. That's why, obviously, the democracy is superior to the monarchy. It was de Tocqueville who said that democracy is always right, but for the wrong reasons. Because there is operating in a democracy the principle that Buckminster Fuller calls synergy. And synergy is the intelligence of a highly complex system, the nature of which is always unknown to the individual members. Because that goes back again to this point, that we're always entering a new environment. We don't ever know fully what the new environment is, because the only environments we know are the past ones. There is always then operating in the development of cellular life on any level a new way of organization, higher than any existing form, and we are not aware of it until after it's happened. If you ever saw, for example, the film Kon-Tiki, this man figured out a few things as to how to make a balsa wood raft to sail from South America to the Pacific Islands. But once he had set this in motion, he discovered that all sorts of unexpected factors cooperated with him. That when the wood got wet, it expanded so that the ties bit into it and held it completely secure. He had never expected that. And he found that as he sailed along, a flying fish would simply alight flat on the deck every morning for breakfast. That all kinds of natural factors, it was this, he had touched a key where he was flowing with the course of nature, and everything cooperated with him. Because he had touched the key. He had made the act of faith. And he was just picking up, in other words, a practice which had been hundreds and hundreds of years ago, had been followed by others who had worked it out by their great ecological awareness. So we do come out of this way of of thinking to something which has, I would say, the most enormously creative and revolutionary social consequences. That it has become not virtuous, not self-sacrificing, not anything like that. It has become the hardest practical politics to let go control to others, to give up trying to dominate the scene. Also, in a parallel way, it has become at this time in our history very much hard practical politics. To learn how to enjoy ourselves. You can go to the Protestant people with their Protestant ethic who are against this kind of thing, and now say to them with great glee, it is your solemn duty to learn how to enjoy yourself. Why? Because in an age of leisure, people have really got to know how to enjoy themselves. Because if they don't, they'll smash the whole future of the human race. So a utopia has become not some sort of a dream, but an urgent necessity. We can't do without it. Because if we try to do without it, what's going to happen is that we are going to terminate our race in a mutual massacre of scapegoats. And so the present paranoia in the United States that is going on, where everybody is thinking up a new scapegoat and how great it will be to demolish them or get them out of power. All this kind of bickering and right and left politics has become irrelevant because we now have the opportunity of trusting our own intelligence, our own technology. To take the risk of doing what we want, which will work to the extent that we realize that what I want, basically, what I really want is what you want. And I don't know what you want. It surprised me. But that's the kinship between I and thou. So when I ask, I go right down to the question, should we start with, what do I want? The answer is, I don't know. When Bodhidharma was asked, who are you, which is another form of the same question, he said, I don't know. Planting flowers to which the butterflies come. Bodhidharma says, I know not. I don't know what I want. Well, when you don't know what you want, you've reached the state of desirelessness. When you really don't know. But you see, there's a beginning stage of not knowing, and there's an ending stage of not knowing. In the beginning stage, you don't know what you want because you haven't thought about it, or you've only thought superficially. Then when somebody forces you to think about it and go through and say, yeah, I think I'd like this, I think I'd like that, I think I'd like the other, there's the middle stage. Then you get beyond that. Say, is that what I really want? In the end you say, no, I don't think that's it. I might be satisfied with it for a while, and I wouldn't turn my nose up at it, but it's not really what I want. Why don't you really know what you want? Two reasons that you don't really know what you want. Number one, you have it. Number two, You don't know yourself, because you never can. The Godhead is never an object of its own knowledge. Just as a knife doesn't cut itself, fire doesn't burn itself, light doesn't illumine itself. It's always an endless mystery to itself. I don't know. And this I don't know, uttered in the infinite interior of the spirit, this I don't know is the same thing as I love, I let go, I don't try to force or control. It's the same thing as humility. And so the Upanishads say, if you think that you understand Brahman, you do not understand, and you have yet to be instructed further. If you know that you do not understand, then you truly understand. For the Brahman is unknown to those who know it, and known to those who know it not.
You know, there's something rather strange that's been happening to you lately. The things that used to light you up don't anymore. That song you played on repeat until your ears bled, now it's just noise. The food you craved tastes like cardboard in your mouth. Even the people you love, the ones whose laughter used to fill your chest with warmth, they feel distant, muted, like you're watching them through glass. And here's what terrifies you most. You're starting to wonder if you've lost the ability to feel anything at all. If something inside you has died and you didn't even notice it dying, but I want to suggest something quite different to you today. What if this numbness isn't death at all? What if it's the most dangerous phase of waking up you'll ever experience? Let me describe it more precisely, because I suspect you know exactly what I'm talking about. You wake up in the morning and there's nothing. No dread. Exactly. No excitement either. Just a kind of gray neutrality that follows you like a shadow. You scroll through your phone looking for something, anything that might spark that old feeling. A video, a message, a piece of news that matters. Nothing lands. You try your old escapes. Maybe you binge a series you used to love. Maybe you buy something you don't need. Maybe you reach for a drink, a substance, a person. And here's the truly terrifying part. Even when you get what you wanted, even when the thing arrives or the experience happens, there's no payload, no rush, no satisfaction. It's like biting into fruit and tasting only texture. The sweetness is gone, and you start to panic, don't you? You start running through possibilities in your mind. Am I depressed? Is this a chemical imbalance? Did I burn myself out? Am I broken? You might even go to a doctor. Get tested. Try medications. Read articles about dopamine and serotonin, about hedonic adaptation and anhedonia, and maybe some of that helps. Or maybe it doesn't. Because what if I told you that what you're experiencing isn't a malfunction at all? What if this loss, this death of the old joy, is actually a birth in disguise? To understand what I mean, we need to look at what we've been calling joy all these years. Because I don't think you've lost joy. I think you've lost something else entirely. Think back to the last time you felt genuinely happy. Really happy. What was happening? Chances are you weren't just experiencing something pleasant. You were experiencing relief. Relief from hunger when you ate that perfect meal. Relief from loneliness when someone finally texted you back. Relief from boredom when you found that perfect show. Relief from anxiety when the weekend finally arrived. You see, most of what we call pleasure is actually just the cessation of discomfort. It's like this. Imagine you're hitting yourself with a hammer, over and over, and then you stop. The moment you stop feels amazing, doesn't it? Your whole body floods with relief. But that's not happiness. That's just not being hit anymore. This is what the Buddha was pointing at when he said life is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Not that life is suffering exactly, but that it's fundamentally unstable, based on lack. We spend our entire lives in this bizarre cycle. Create a problem. Solve the problem. Feel good for a moment. Create another problem. Make yourself hungry so eating feels good. Make yourself lonely so connection feels good. Make yourself bored so entertainment feels good. We've become like addicts who need the withdrawal just to feel the high of the fix. And for most of your life, this worked. This game of scratching itches you created yourself, it was enough. It felt like living. But then something shifted. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it happened all at once. But at some point, your consciousness saw through the trick. It's like when you learn how a magic trick works. Once you see the wires, the mirrors, the sleight of hand, you can't unsee them. The magic is broken forever. You can't go back to being fooled. And this is what's happened to you. You've become immune to your own manipulation. The itch you create no longer feels real enough to make the scratch satisfying. The hunger you manufacture doesn't make the food taste better. The loneliness you cultivate doesn't make connection feel profound. You've seen through it. And once you've seen through it, the whole game collapses. This is why nothing brings you joy anymore. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown a fundamentally childish way of experiencing life. And right now, you're in withdrawal. Not from drugs or alcohol, but from something far more addictive. You're in withdrawal from experience itself, from the constant stimulation, the peaks and valleys, the drama of your own creation. You're a thrill addict who's been cut off from the supply. And like any addict in withdrawal, you feel like you're dying. You feel hollow, empty, like a ghost walking through a world that's lost its color. You look at people around you who still seem to be enjoying things, and you feel envious, confused. Why can they still feel and I can't? But they're not more alive than you. They're just still asleep, still willing to believe in the game, still able to get high on their own manufactured crises and resolutions. You can't anymore. I knew a woman once, let's call her Maya, who went through this exact thing. She was a musician. Her whole identity was built around the rush of performing, the high of applause, the intoxication of creating something beautiful. And then one day, she sat down at her piano and nothing. No inspiration, no joy, no connection to the instrument that had been her voice for 20 years. She thought she was finished, thought her gift had been taken away. What she didn't realize was that her gift wasn't music. Her gift was the silence underneath the music. And she was finally becoming quiet enough to hear it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before you can hear the silence, you have to survive the absence of noise. And I know this feels like death. I know it feels like something precious has been taken from you. But stay with me here, because this is where it gets interesting. Imagine you've spent your entire life in a dimly lit room, a room lit only by candles. And you've been fascinated by the shadows these candles cast on the walls, the dancing shapes, the flickering movements. You've spent years watching these shadows, finding meaning in them, being entertained by them, occasionally frightened by them. They've been your whole world. And then one day, someone opens a window, and sunlight, real sunlight, floods into the room. What happens to the shadows? They vanish. Not because the light went out, but because the light became too bright. The candles are still burning, but you can't see their shadows anymore. They're overwhelmed by something infinitely more luminous. And here's the thing. For the first few moments after that window opens, you might actually think you've gone blind. Because your eyes, so accustomed to the dimness, to the subtle variations of shadow, can't yet process this much light. It's too much, too bright, too intense. So it looks like nothing, like emptiness, like a blank, washed out void. This is where you are right now. The window has opened, the light has come in, and your perception, still calibrated for shadows and candlelight, can't yet see what's here. So it feels like nothing, like absence, like loss. But it's not absence. It's presence so complete, so full, that your current way of seeing can't comprehend it yet. You're not depressed. You're not broken. You're being recalibrated. And the worst thing you can do right now, the absolute worst thing, is try to go back. Try to close the window. Try to relight the candles. Try to manufacture shadows again. I've watched people do this. When the old pleasures stop working, they panic and they try to force it. They seek more extreme experiences, louder music, stronger substances, more dangerous thrills. They jump from relationship to relationship, hobby to hobby, belief system to belief system, desperately trying to feel something, anything. And all this does is delay the inevitable. Because you can't go back to sleep once you've woken up. You can pretend. You can exhaust yourself trying. But the innocence is gone. So what do you do instead? Here's what nobody tells you. You stop trying. You stop trying to feel joy. You stop trying to get back what you've lost. You stop trying to fix yourself. Because there's nothing to fix. You're like a caterpillar that's dissolved into liquid inside a cocoon, wondering why it can't walk anymore, why it can't eat leaves, why everything that used to define it is gone. You're not a caterpillar anymore, but you're not yet a butterfly. You're just soup, formless, undefined, in between. And this is unbearable for the mind, isn't it? Because the mind wants to know what it is, wants to have an identity, wants to be something. But you're not something right now. You're nothing becoming everything. You have to give up, you see. Not give up on life. Give up on trying. You have to stop trying to feel joy the way you stopped trying to catch smoke. Stop trying to get back to how things were. You understand? There is no back. There's only this formless moment, this soup you've become. And the more you thrash around trying to be something recognizable, the longer you stay liquid. And if you can just be with this, if you can stop fighting it, stop trying to resurrect the corpse of your old way of being, something new emerges. Not the old joy, something quieter, subtler, harder to describe. The old joy was like fireworks, loud, bright, impressive, but brief. This new thing, it's more like the sky itself. It's not an experience. It's the space in which experience happens. It's not a feeling. It's the awareness that feels. Do you see the difference? The old happiness required contrast, required things to be good or bad, pleasurable or painful, exciting or boring. It needed the hammer so it could feel the relief of stopping. But this doesn't need anything. It's already here, already complete. Whether you're eating a gourmet meal or stale bread, it's here. Whether you're in love or alone, it's here. Whether you're succeeding or failing, it's here. I once knew a man who spent his whole life chasing experiences. He traveled to every country, tried every drug, had every kind of relationship. And then, one day, he just stopped. He sat in his garden, doing nothing, for hours at a time. His friends thought he'd given up, thought he was depressed. But when I asked him about it, he said something I've never forgotten. He said, I finally realized I was traveling around the world looking for my house. And then I noticed I was already standing in it. This is what happens on the other side of the emptiness. You stop looking for life and realize you are life. You stop searching for joy and discover you are the space in which joy and sorrow both arise and dissolve. You don't need things to be a certain way anymore. Not because you've given up or become numb, but because you've found something that doesn't depend on circumstances. A kind of okayness. Not happiness, exactly. Not bliss. Just okayness. Everything is fundamentally okay, even when it's not okay. Does that make sense? Probably not. Not yet. Because this isn't something you can understand intellectually. It's something you become. And you can't force it. You can't achieve it through effort. In fact, the more you try to get there, the further away you get. It's like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. Just be here. In the grayness, in the flatness, in the void. Without trying to escape it, without trying to fix it, without trying to understand it. Just sit in it like you'd sit in a waiting room. Not enjoying it, not suffering through it. Just waiting. And here's the paradox. the moment you stop trying to get somewhere else, the moment you stop resisting what is, you arrive not at some special state, not at some peak experience. You arrive at reality itself, unfiltered, unmediated, unadorned. And it's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. See, you haven't lost joy. You've just become too big for the small pleasures that used to contain you. Like a child who grows too tall for their favorite hiding spot. The spot didn't disappear. You just don't fit in it anymore. And yes, that's sad in a way. There's a real grief in this. Grief for the simplicity of the old way, for the innocence that's been lost. But would you really want to go back? Would you really want to shrink yourself down just to fit into that small space again? Or would you rather grow into the vastness that's opening up before you? The choice is yours, of course. You can keep trying to light candles in the sunlight. You can keep manufacturing problems so you can feel the relief of solving them. You can keep chasing the ghost of a happiness that was never really happiness at all. Or you can sit here in this uncomfortable in-between and wait. Wait for your eyes to adjust to the light. Wait for a new way of seeing to emerge. Wait for the butterfly you are becoming to finish forming its wings. It won't look like you thought it would. It won't feel like you expected it to. But it will be real. More real than anything you've experienced before. And here's the final thing nobody tells you. The emptiness you're feeling right now, it's not empty. It never was. You've been calling it numbness, calling it depression, calling it death. But it's none of those things. It's just space. Space that was always there, hidden beneath the noise. Space that was always holding everything. The joy, the sorrow, the hunger, the satisfaction. You are that space. Not the things moving through it. Not the feelings coming and going. The space itself. And space doesn't need anything to be complete. It doesn't need to be filled. It doesn't need to be fixed. It just is. So when you ask, why doesn't anything bring me joy anymore?
You see, this is the central joke of existence, and we've all missed it. Somewhere along the way, human beings forgot that life was meant to be played. We turned the dance of existence into a march towards some imagined finish line. We made a drama out of what was meant to be divine comedy. Now, you may wonder, how could life be fun when there is pain, loss, and death? But that's exactly the misunderstanding. The gods, that is to say, the infinite intelligence behind all this, never intended a world without contrast. They made a universe that could taste itself, know itself, and feel itself in every possible form. But somewhere in that grand play, we the players began to believe that our roles were all there was. We forgot that we were acting. Imagine an actor on stage who suddenly believes the tragedy is real. He's been stabbed in the play, and instead of falling gracefully, he panics, calls for help, runs off to the hospital. Everyone laughs, not cruelly, but because they know it's pretend. And yet, that is precisely what man does with his suffering. We take the play too seriously. Pain is real enough, yes, but suffering is what happens when you cling to it, when you make a home in it, when you build your identity around it. Pain passes, suffering lingers, because suffering depends on memory, on story, on time. And time, as you'll see, is the trick we play on ourselves. We divide experience into past and future, and then we live in the tension between them, regretting what's gone and fearing what's to come. But the only thing that has ever existed is now. You can't suffer in the present moment. You can only suffer in thought, and thought lives in time. So, when I say man suffers because he takes life too seriously, I mean this. We have confused the symbols for the real. We live in our heads, in ideas, in names and labels. We have made words like success, failure, good, evil, rich, poor, into gods, and then we bow to them. Take money,
for instance. Money is paper, numbers, symbols, yet people kill, lie, and destroy themselves over it. Not because of the paper, but because of what the symbol represents: security, power, worth. We forget that we invented it, that it's a game of trust and exchange. When the child grows up and forgets that monopoly isn't real, he becomes anxious. The same has happened to our entire civilization. And so, we chase symbols instead of experiences. We chase approval instead of love, image instead of being, control instead of flow. No wonder we are exhausted, we are fighting imaginary battles in a world that was never at war. Suffering is not the punishment of life, it is the tension that arises when you try to make the impermanent permanent. You cling to youth, and time takes it. You cling to possessions, and chance removes them. You cling to love, and even love must change its form. Everything flows. Everything dies into something else. The river doesn't suffer because it can't hold its waves, it celebrates them. But man resists the river. He builds walls to control it, then cries when the water breaks through. That is suffering. Now, this doesn't mean you should deny pain or pretend that you enjoy what hurts. It means learning to see pain as part of the music, a note among others. You cannot have melody without tension and release. The dissonance is what makes the harmony sweet. So, if you look deeply, you will find that life is not out to harm you. Life is simply performing itself. It is you who has decided that the performance must meet your expectations. But life was never obligated to your script. You see, the universe is not serious in the way we are serious. It is playful, experimental, spontaneous. The galaxies spin, the seasons change, the waves rise and fall, not for a purpose, but because that's what they do. To imagine that existence has a final purpose is like asking, what is the purpose of music? The answer is not to reach the end of the song, but to dance while it plays. And yet, we keep trying to reach the last note. We work, save, strive, and plan for a moment when we'll finally be there. But when you get there, you find it's just another here. So, you move the goalpost, and the game continues. We are all like cats chasing their tails, unaware that what we seek is already within the circle we are spinning. Man suffers because he has forgotten how to play. To play is not to be careless, it is to be present. The dancer does not know every step before she begins. The joy is in the movement itself, but we've replaced that with calculation, expectation, and comparison. We ask, am I dancing better than the others? And in doing so, we lose the rhythm entirely. This is why the sages laughed. They saw humanity running faster and faster toward nowhere. They saw men building ladders to reach the sky, forgetting that they were already standing on the earth they sought. You do not need to earn peace. You only need to stop pretending you lost it. Every time you try to make life more serious, you tighten the knot of suffering. You demand answers, control, guarantees. But the game was designed to have none. For if you knew every outcome, if life unfolded exactly to your plan, where would the wonder be? You may notice how children approach life. They cry and laugh in the same minute. They can be utterly heartbroken over a lost toy, and then moments later, giggling at a butterfly. They are not less wise than adults, they are freer, because they have not yet learned to chain joy to conditions. They feel, and then they move on. But we, the clever ones, call this foolish. We build stories around our pain and call it meaning. We nurse our wounds long after they've healed, because we've grown used to the identity they provide. The truth is, you are not what happens to you. You are the space it happens in. You are the screen upon which the movie plays, not the characters acting it out. But when you identify with the story, every tragedy feels personal. Every change feels like a death. When the gods created this play, they hid themselves in you. They wanted to see if you could remember. They wanted to see if you could laugh in the middle of the storm. to dance in the middle of the uncertainty, because the moment you can laugh, you are free. To suffer seriously is to forget the laughter of the cosmos. Even your failures are part of the joke. Every time you fall, life whispers, "Ah, so you wanted to try that way now, you see." It's not punishment, it's feedback. And when you stop taking it personally, you begin to learn again like a child. Man suffers because he resists the rhythm, but the rhythm goes on. So why not join the dance? To understand this is not to escape life, but to meet it more fully. When you stop struggling against the way things are, you begin to feel the current carry you. You still move, still act, still create, but without the weight of needing to win. You see, liberation is not an achievement. It's the recognition that there was never a prison. The door was open all along, but you were too busy guarding it. You can't control the sea, but you can learn to surf. You can't command the wind, but you can raise your sails. That's the art. That's wisdom. And once you see this, suffering starts to dissolve, because suffering needs resistance to survive. Without your seriousness, without your belief that something is wrong, it has no ground to stand on. So laugh not because life is easy, but because you finally understand the joke. When you realize that you are not a victim of the play, but a participant, the stage becomes beautiful again. The storms become music, the losses become rhythm, and every pain becomes another note in the great song of being. It was never meant to be a punishment. It was meant to be a performance. And so, the gods smile, because finally you've remembered how to play. When you begin to see that life was never meant to be taken so seriously, something remarkable happens. The weight begins to fall away. You notice that the problems you thought were crushing you are not as solid as they appeared. They are more like shadows created by your stance toward the light. Change your position, and the shadow moves. Suffering, you see, is not built into the world. It's built into how we see the world. Pain may be inevitable, but suffering is the story we tell about pain, the commentary, the resistance, the belief that this should not be happening to me. That is the heartbeat of suffering. This should not be, but what if it should? What if the universe knows exactly what it's doing, even when you don't? You suffer because you want to know before you live. You want the map before the journey, the guarantee before the leap. Yet life was never designed to be safe in that way. It is an adventure, and adventure requires uncertainty. If you knew every twist and turn, there would be no discovery, no awakening, no joy. The end of suffering begins the moment you stop demanding explanations. That doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop fighting. You see that your control was always imaginary, that life has been guiding you even through your confusion. Think of how a river moves. It doesn't avoid the rocks, it flows around them. It doesn't curse the bends in its path, it turns gracefully, because it knows there is no wrong direction, only the way forward. Human beings are the only creatures who can make a prison out of thought. A bird loses a feather and simply grows another. A tree sheds its leaves and stands bare without shame. But we lose, and then we mourn the loss for decades. We replay the story, we dramatize it, we relive it in memory until the pain becomes part of who we think we are. That's the tragedy. We are too clever for our own peace. To end suffering, you must learn to suffer consciously, to let pain move through you without turning it into identity. You can't escape storms, but you can stop calling them curses. You've been told all your life to seek happiness, to chase positivity, to avoid discomfort. But happiness, as it's sold to you, is not peace, it's tension wearing perfume. True peace is not the avoidance of difficulty. It's the deep trust that even difficulty has meaning. When you stop dividing the world into good and bad, gain and loss, success and failure, something astonishing happens. You begin to see the pattern. What once seemed random reveals an underlying intelligence. The delays that frustrated you become protection. The heartbreaks become purification. The detours become direction. This is not mystical optimism, it's clarity. The truth is, you don't end suffering by fixing life. You end suffering by no longer arguing with it. You stop fighting what is and begin to live as part of it. And then, one day, you look around and realize you've become still, not because nothing's happening, but because everything is happening through you rather than to you. That stillness is not numbness, it's awareness without struggle. It's the recognition that you are not the storm, you are the sky. The sky does not resist the clouds. It doesn't panic when thunder rolls or lightning strikes. It allows all things to appear and disappear, knowing they cannot harm it. You are that sky-boundless awareness, temporarily believing it is a person lost in weather. And when you realize this, you begin to laugh again. The laughter is the sound of freedom, the sound of remembering that you were never trapped. All along, the cage was made of thought. Let go of your seriousness, and you find that joy is not something you earn. It's your natural state, obscured by effort. The secret of the wise man is not that he never feels sorrow. It's that he allows sorrow to pass through him like wind through bamboo. He does not hold it, he does not label it. He simply experiences it fully, and in doing so, it dissolves. If you can allow yourself to feel deeply joy, pain, confusion, peace, without clinging to any of it, you will see that all feelings are waves in the same ocean. The ocean is never harmed by its waves. Suffering ends when you stop identifying with the wave and remember that you are the ocean. This remembering is what the mystics called awakening. Not because you become something new, but because you stop pretending to be something small. When you understand that the very force that moves the stars also beats your heart, you stop trying to force the rhythm, you begin to trust it. And trust is the opposite of suffering. Suffering comes from mistrust of yourself, of others, of the world. It's the refusal to let life lead. But you are life. The dancer cannot fight the dance without tripping. There's a beautiful irony here. When you finally give up trying to escape suffering, you discover that it escapes you. The very act of acceptance dissolves the resistance that keeps it alive. This is the truth hidden in the great teachings that freedom is not found in conquest, but in surrender. Not in domination, but in understanding. And surrender, you see, is not weakness, it's intelligence. It's cooperation with the inevitable. It's the realization that you don't have to hold up the sky, it stays up by itself. You are not meant to carry the world on your shoulders. The world is carrying you. All your struggles to prove yourself, to justify your existence, to become worthy, they were never required. You were worthy by virtue of being alive. Life did not make a mistake in expressing itself as you. When you see that, the burden drops. You stop trying to fix the universe and start flowing with it. And then something miraculous happens. The very same circumstances that once felt unbearable begin to look beautiful. The traffic jam becomes silence. The heartbreak becomes depth. The uncertainty becomes possibility. Because you no longer demand that life match your preferences, everything becomes a teacher. This is the great freedom. And so, when I say this lecture will end your suffering, I do not mean that you will never feel pain again. I mean that you will stop fighting life. You will stop believing that you were ever separate from it. Suffering ends not when you gain control, but when you lose the need for it. When you stop trying to make sense of everything, you begin to experience everything. When you stop chasing the meaning of life, you begin to live it. Life is not a problem to be solved, it's a dance to be witnessed. And just as the dancer disappears into the movement, so too will you disappear into the flow. You will forget to call it suffering because you will have remembered what it always was: the motion of change, the breath of becoming, the play of existence rediscovering itself. So, laugh. Laugh because the gods are laughing with you. Laugh because you finally see that there was nothing to escape, nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Laugh because the serious man never finds peace, and the playful one never loses it. When you can laugh at your own seriousness, the world softens. You will see that even your tears are part of the joke that the cosmic comedian has written you into the grand play, not as a victim, but as a participant in its beauty. So, let it all happen. Let the joy, the pain, the confusion, the silence, all come and go. They are visitors in your house. You are the space that welcomes them. And when you stop locking the door, you will find that they never stayed to harm you, they only came to dance. That is the end of suffering. It's not the end of feeling, it's the end of resistance. It's not the end of life's movement, it's the rediscovery of your stillness within it. And in that stillness, you will know the simple truth that has been waiting beneath every question, that you were never broken, you were only dreaming of being separate from what was whole all along.
There is beneath all our cleverness a quiet faculty that no machine can mimic. It is the art of listening to what is not being said. When you step into a room, something stirs long before language begins. You can sense who holds the center of gravity, who hides behind a polite expression, who aches to be seen without daring to say so. This is not analysis. It is awareness, older than the mind itself. It is the body knowing before the mind interferes. Modern life teaches us to speak quickly, to think sharply, to fill every silence with words. But the more noise we make, the more we lose the subtle music underneath it all. Social intelligence is not the power to persuade or impress. It is the quiet attunement to the living current flowing between human beings. When you move from this stillness, others do not merely hear you, they resonate with you. For connection is not made through speech, but through the shared silence beneath it. Most of what passes between human beings is never spoken. The real conversation happens in the pauses, in the soft currents that flow beneath the surface of words. Think of a moment when someone said, "I'm fine," but you felt they weren't. No evidence, no argument, just a quiet knowing in your chest. Or the way a friend's silence felt heavier than any explanation could be. This is where social intelligence lives. Not in clever speeches, but in the spaces between them. We've built a culture that worships language. The louder, the sharper, the better. We teach people to talk, but seldom to listen. And when silence arrives, most grow restless, as though something essential has gone missing. But silence isn't absence. Silence is the ground from which real connection grows. Words are like ripples on water. They reveal movement, but the depth is felt below. When you learn to sense beneath words, you begin to hear the tremor behind a laugh, the hesitation before a yes, the small griefs tucked inside ordinary sentences. To be socially intelligent is to allow yourself to feel these undercurrents without rushing to fix or explain them. It's to be present enough for another person to exhale, not because you solved their problem, but because they finally felt understood. Real connection doesn't happen in speeches. It happens in the quiet recognition that two human beings are breathing the same moment. To move with grace among others, one must first learn the quiet art of knowing oneself. Social intelligence is not a mask you wear to impress. It begins with the stillness within you, the inner compass. When you are at odds with your own emotions, everything outside becomes distorted. A simple look may feel like judgment, a silence like rejection. But when you begin to understand your own tides, anger, fear, longing, joy, you no longer drown in them, you float. And from that calm water, it becomes possible to see others clearly. Emotional intelligence is that inner compass. It's the ability to feel a storm inside without being swept away. But a compass alone is not enough. A sailor who never looks outward will lose the shore. Social intelligence is the map, the ability to navigate the subtle landscapes of other hearts. Every person carries their own weather. Some arrive like sunlight, others like quiet rain. When your inner compass is steady, you can sense their changing skies without confusing them for your own. You begin to notice the tremor in someone's breath, the way their words don't always match their eyes. And rather than reacting, you respond. This is the balance, to know where you stand within and to walk gently in the world without. One keeps you anchored, the other lets you travel far. To read another person is not to pry into them, nor to decode them like a puzzle. It is to stand quietly at the edge of their being and allow yourself to feel the ripples they make in the world. Most people imagine communication as something that happens through words, but the body speaks long before the mouth does. A slight tightening around the eyes, the way someone inhales before answering, the small delay before a smile, all these are little doorways into the unspoken. And you don't need special training to notice them. You only need to stop rushing past what is already there. We live in an age that values quick answers, fast replies, and clever remarks. But the art of reading people belongs to a slower rhythm. It happens when you allow your mind to quiet, your eyes to soften, your presence to stretch beyond your own thoughts. And in that stillness, something extraordinary occurs. People begin to reveal themselves, not because you force them to, but because they feel seen. They feel you're listening. To read people is not to control or manipulate. It's to listen with the whole of your being. To notice when a voice trembles, but the words remain strong. To sense when a silence is tender and when it is full of pain. You don't interpret them, you meet them. The moment you truly see another person, not through the fog of your own judgments, but through quiet attention, something shifts in the air between you. It's almost invisible, like the faint change in temperature before rain. This is where trust begins. Not in grand gestures or elaborate promises, but in the simple human recognition. I am being felt. I am not alone in here. People don't trust because of what you say. They trust because, for a brief moment, they sense that their inner world has been noticed without being handled. It is the rare experience of being understood without being interrupted. This kind of presence is not decoration, it's foundation. When someone feels seen at this level, defenses soften. The walls they spent years building loosen, even just a little. And from that quiet opening, trust begins to take root. Not as an agreement, but as a shared silence between two human beings. Trust is a strange thing. You cannot demand it, you cannot force it, and you cannot bargain for it. It grows the way dawn arrives, slowly, without announcement. Real influence does not belong to the loudest voice in the room, but to the presence that others feel is steady. You've seen it before. Someone speaks softly, and yet the room listens. Not because their words are dazzling, but because people can sense something beneath them. A quiet ground, a sincerity that asks for nothing. Social intelligence isn't about persuading people to bend to your will. It is the art of becoming someone others feel safe to open their world to. Trust is built not through clever arguments, but through the simple consistency of presence. When you truly listen, not to reply, not to prove, but simply to be there, people recognize it immediately. It touches something older than logic. It says, I see you, I'm not here to fix you, I'm here to be with you. And from that trust, influence flows on its own, not as pressure, but as gravity. Gentle, invisible, effortless. A tree does not convince you of its shade. You simply walk toward it because it stands where it has always stood. So it is with trust. Influence is not the storm. It is the still air that gathers people without a word. Long before we learn to speak, we learn to feel one another. Long before we built cities and systems, we gathered around firelight, reading the flicker in someone's eyes more easily than the words that came after. Connection is not a modern skill. It is the oldest language we share. The rhythm of another's breath, the tremor in their voice, the heaviness or lightness of their silence. Your body knows how to read this. It always has. It is not something you learn so much as something you remember. Modern life often makes us forget. We build walls of analysis, of speed, of distraction. But beneath it all, your nervous system is still listening, still tuning itself to the quiet music between people. When someone is in pain, a part of you aches. When someone laughs, something in you softens. This isn't sentimentality. It is the design of being human. We are wired to connect the way trees lean toward light. And when you allow yourself to trust that instinct, to sense before you speak, to feel before you explain, your interactions become less about control and more about attunement. In that space, conversation turns into something older than language. Two beings remembering they were never truly separate. We live in an age where noise has become the default setting. Not just the restless noise of the world, but the chatter inside the mind that never seems to rest. Everyone is speaking. Few are listening. And in that endless exchange of words, presence is lost. Presence isn't a performance. It isn't about perfect posture, nodding at the right time or pretending to be calm. It's the art of being here fully, without rehearsing what comes next. You felt it before. When someone looks at you, not past you. When their attention doesn't wander. When you feel in the marrow of your being that in this moment you don't have to explain yourself. Their silence is not empty. It is spacious. In a world so addicted to distraction, presence has become rare and therefore powerful. It slows the rhythm of conversation. It turns noise into music. It allows the small, quiet truths in people to rise to the surface without being drowned out. Machines may outthink us, but they cannot be with us. They cannot offer the kind of stillness that makes another human exhale. Presence is not something you build. It's something you stop covering up. And when you offer that kind of space to others, they recognize it immediately. Not with their intellect, but with their soul. What binds us most deeply is rarely spoken. The most honest conversations are carried in the eyes, in the tilt of the head, in the rhythm of a breath shared between two people who need not explain themselves. Empathy isn't a technique. It is the simple act of standing beside another human being without rushing to correct or repair their experience. It is the art of feeling with, not fixing for. When someone is grieving, words often fall short, but a steady hand, a soft gaze, or a quiet presence can speak with a language older than speech itself. We often imagine that influence comes from great speeches or brilliant arguments, yet more often it comes from the silent way we meet another person's heart. To be empathetic is not to drown in another's feeling, it is to let your presence become wide enough to hold it gently, as a river holds the reflection of the moon, without grasping, without claiming, without needing to change it. But empathy without ground becomes a flood. If you lean too far into another's storm, you may lose your footing. And when that happens, compassion turns to confusion, listening turns to reaction. This is where many people falter, not because they don't care, but because they haven't yet learned to stand firm in the winds they invite. To offer true presence is not to carry someone else's pain as your own. It is to hold space for it without becoming it, like a tree that bends but does not break. And it is in these moments, when emotions grow heavy, that the quiet art of emotional mastery begins, not as control, but as a return to center. From empathy, we step gently into strength. Conflict in itself is not the enemy. It is simply a moment when two worlds meet and neither wishes to disappear. Most people treat conflict as a battlefield, rushing to defend their position, to prove themselves right. But the wise approach it as a mirror. What unsettles us in another often touches something unsteady within ourselves. When anger rises, when pride stiffens the spine, when the voice grows sharp, that is not the moment to conquer the other. It is the moment to return to stillness. Emotional mastery does not mean suppressing feeling. It means meeting it like an old friend who has come to deliver a message. If you can remain steady, when your chest tightens, when your breath grows shallow, you will find that conflict loses its teeth. Your stillness becomes the calm center around which the storm turns. And from this place, listening returns. The other person no longer feels they are fighting against you, but being heard by you. And when listening enters a room, truth becomes possible again. To master emotion is not to harden against life. It is to stand in its waves without losing your balance. When one of you remains anchored, the quarrel slowly remembers its humanity. And what began as tension becomes an opening. What follows is not victory or defeat, but quiet. The air between you no longer strains under the weight of opposing wills. It loosens. A calm begins to shape itself in the space where resistance once lived. This is the quiet strength that does not need to announce itself. When you remain steady in the storm, you become something people lean toward without quite knowing why. It isn't about being wiser or stronger. It's about not leaving yourself. Others may raise their voices, their defenses, their fears, but your stillness does not mirror their storm, like the riverbank beside a rushing current. You give shape to the moment without trying to control the water. In that kind of presence, something in the other person begins to settle too. People rarely remember arguments in detail, but they remember how they felt when they stood near someone who did not fight them back. Safety is not a speech. It's a felt thing, quiet, wordless, and unmistakable. To become a safe space is not to fix others. It is simply to be a place where their walls can rest, where their breath can drop a little lower into the body. And when you carry that steadiness into the world, you stop trying to win people over. They come closer on their own. True social intelligence is not a set of tricks or polished performances. It is not how well you speak, how charming you sound, or how quickly you think. It is the quiet art of being so fully yourself that others feel free to be themselves too. All the techniques, reading people, building trust, mastering emotion, they are only different doors that lead back to the same place, presence. The presence that listens more than it explains. The presence that steadies rather than reacts. The presence that does not need to win to be strong. When people leave your company, they will not replay your perfect sentences. They will remember how they felt around you, whether they could breathe a little easier, whether they felt seen, whether they felt safe. And that is the real power here, not to shine above others, but to become a space where they no longer need to defend themselves. Social intelligence is not learned in books alone. It is remembered in the silence between words, in the calm between storms, in the stillness you carry inside. When you embody that, you no longer need to try to connect. Connection happens on its own. Isn't it curious? The more you give yourself away, the less you are truly seen. If the sun never set, we would cease to notice its light. If a bird sang without pause, its song would dissolve into noise. But the moment you step back, the moment you withdraw into silence, suddenly your presence takes on weight. People feel the shape of your absence, and in that very emptiness, you are valued again. This is one of life's delicious paradoxes. What is constant becomes invisible, what is scarce becomes precious. I don't mean trickery, nor the silly business of playing hard to get. That is just another mask. What I mean is the art of honoring your own presence, of moving with the same rhythm you find in the tides, in the waxing and waning of the moon. For even nature does not give itself all at once, nor all the time. Whatever is constant and without limit soon feels ordinary. Its gift lies not in burning without end, but in the rhythm of rising and falling, appearing and disappearing. If the sun never set, we would soon grow weary of its light and long for shadow. So it is with you. Your presence has power because it comes and goes like the tides that advance and recede, like love that breathes in closeness and in distance. Respect is born not from endless exposure, but from the spaces in between. Have you noticed how quickly generosity turns into expectation? The one who always says yes is soon taken for granted, while the one who withholds at times is cherished when they appear. It is not about virtue, but about balance. To step back is to remember your humanity. You are not a machine, but a rhythm, like the sea that ebbs and flows, like the moon that waxes and wanes. For life itself is not a straight line, but a dance of presence and absence. Isn't it strange? The moment you cease to be forever at hand, the relationship takes on new life. For when you are not always there, people no longer treat you as furniture in the room, but as a presence to be encountered. They lean closer. They listen. They treasure the passing moment. Even your silence, even your absence begins to speak. We only notice the sweetness of water when it grows scarce. When it gushes everywhere, it is wasted and ignored. But when it is drawn from a deep well, each sip is savored. So it is with your presence. If you flood the world with yourself, you wash away your value. But when you come and go like the tide, your presence refreshes like cool water in the desert. From childhood, we are taught to smile, to nod, to say yes, mistaking obedience for affection and availability for love. Yet love, like a garden, needs space to breathe. Too much rain drowns it, too much sun withers it. It flourishes in rhythm, not excess. Absence is not emptiness, but the interval that gives shape. Just as music is made not only of notes, but of the silence between them, so too love ripens in the dance of nearness and distance. Without the pauses, all dissolves into noise. Life is like a melody. And so if you never step back, never say no, you too become noise. Seen but not noticed, heard but not listened to. Value lies in the interval, the well-placed absence. This is not neglect, but rhythm. The tree does not bear fruit in every season. Fire does not burn forever. It must die down so it can be kindled again. Even breath itself depends on exhaling as well as inhaling. Why imagine you must give without rest? When you withdraw and return, your presence gathers weight, like the hush that makes the bells strike resound. And here is the paradox. By making yourself less available, you become more real. People meet your wholeness, not the fragments you scatter. Like the man who speaks rarely, it is not his words that are louder, but his silence that makes them precious. So it is with your presence. Given without pause, it is diluted. Held with rhythm, it gathers intensity. This is why stepping back is sometimes the most loving act of all. Look at love itself. Lovers who clutch too tightly smother the flame, while those who vanish altogether let the fire die. The art lies in rhythm, closeness and distance, voice and silence, embrace and release. Notice how the man who is seldom available is the one most carefully attended, not because his busyness is a virtue, but because his time carries weight. If he gives you a moment, it feels like a gift, for it has not been scattered like seed on barren ground. Contrast this with the one who is forever waiting, forever bending, whose presence is taken for granted precisely because it is always at hand. This is not a question of superiority, but of recognition. When you honor the worth of your own hours, others are compelled to honor them too. But if you spend them carelessly, the world will treat them as trifles. And so, to stop being always available is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the quiet refusal to leap at every summons, to patch every quarrel that is not yours, to serve as the eternal remedy for other people's restlessness. It is to stand rooted in yourself, and from that stillness to act when the moment is right. For your life is not meant to be endlessly consumed, but to be lived, richly, deeply, sincerely. And only from such fullness can you give in a way that nourishes, rather than exhausts. Now here is something quite remarkable. When you cease to be endlessly available, you begin to hear your own life again. For in forever tending to others, you drown the small secret music within. Your days are filled with clamor, but your soul remains unheard. Step back and suddenly you catch the whispers, the quiet callings, the subtle joys, the long-buried desires that rise like forgotten seeds breaking through the soil. To be available to yourself is the beginning of authenticity, and without authenticity, love itself becomes counterfeit. Every yes that betrays your own being is in truth a silent no, and from such denials only resentment can grow. There was a man who spent himself in the service of others, giving until he was emptied. Yet for all his sacrifice, he remained unseen. At last, exhausted, he stepped back. And only then did the world protest. They called him selfish, cold, neglectful. But slowly, something curious began to happen. In his absence, they began to feel the weight he had long carried. For the first time, his presence was no longer taken for granted, but respected. In stepping back, he had not lost love at all. He had opened the door for love to appear, where once there had only been convenience. So you see, to become less available is not an act of rejection, but of invitation. It is the invitation for others to wake up to your presence, and for you to wake up to yourself. For only in the open space between two beings can respect take root and love draw breath. When you are forever at hand, no one stops to wonder who you are or what you truly give. But when you withdraw, when you refuse to play the endless part, suddenly they must pause. They must look. And in that moment of seeing, the whole pattern begins to shift. Why, then, is this so hard? Because we are frightened. We imagine that a single no will banish love. We fear that if we step aside, we shall be forgotten. We tremble that if we honor our own worth, others will not. But ask yourself, if someone values you only so long as you are endlessly at their disposal, is that love, or is it merely convenience? Much of our suffering, you see, is not caused by what others do to us, but by what we permit. Out of fear of displeasing, we stretch ourselves thin, we give beyond our means, we say yes when the heart cries no, and then we cloak this self-betrayal under the name of kindness. But it is no kindness to betray yourself. To give what you do not have is like offering an empty bowl. True kindness flows only from fullness, and fullness requires form. To cease being endlessly available is to honor that form. To say, I am human, I have rhythm, I have worth. And yes, some may drift away when you step back, but then you discover a deeper truth. They were not with you at all, but with the endless fountain they mistook you for. Better to be cherished for your reality than tolerated for your exhaustion. Better to lose those who drained you than to lose yourself altogether. And here again the paradox shows its face. Those who truly matter, those who truly love, will not vanish when you step back. They will bend with you, as trees bend with the wind. They will grow into the space you create, and in that very movement, the bond deepens. So when you cease to be forever at hand, you do not become less, you become more visible, more authentic, more real. You gather together the scattered fragments of yourself and return as a whole being, and life always bows to wholeness. For wholeness has its own gravity. It draws, it attracts, it commands respect without demanding it. The broken self clamors to be noticed, while the whole self is noticed without effort. You cease to be background noise and become the very music to which others listen. Picture yourself as a well. If all may draw without end, the waters will one day vanish, and both you and they will be left thirsty. But when the well is guarded, when it is given time to fill again from its hidden springs, then those who come to drink find refreshment. To withdraw at times, to cease being endlessly available, is simply to keep the waters of your life pure and flowing. This is not selfishness, but the very condition that makes giving possible. From a full well, the water is sweet. From a dry one, nothing can be drawn. Yet the world will not at first thank you for this. Those who were accustomed to your endless flow will call you selfish, accuse you of change, and indeed you have changed. You are no longer a tool to be used, but a being who gives from freedom. This unsettles those who lived upon your weakness, but it strengthens those who honor your strength. In time the numbers may grow fewer, but the bonds grow deeper. For love that is real does not fear your boundary. It bows to it. So then we come to this curious question. Who are you when you're not forever on call, forever answering the ring of the world? Who are you when you sit still, when you stop chasing, when you listen to the hum inside your own skull? Most of us forget, you see, because we're so busy being useful to others that we've misplaced ourselves. But in the silence, in that delicious nothing, you suddenly stumble upon yourself again. And far from being empty, it's wonderfully full. To withdraw is not to desert life, but to return to it. For in stepping back, you discover that life is like breathing in and out. If you only breathe out, you collapse. If you only give, you dry up. The rhythm of the tide is the rhythm of being. You see? It's the old paradox. In not seeking, things come to you. In not clutching, they remain. And so, curiously, when you stop demanding respect, people respect you. When you cease to be always available, you become truly present. You don't have to insist on your worth, you are it. So, The game is not about being endlessly busy, endlessly agreeable. It's about rhythm, sincerity, wholeness. Say yes when it's a real yes. Say no when it's a real no. Step forward when you're full. Step back when it's time to fill. That isn't selfishness. That's simply the wisdom of the dance. And then, as if by magic, life begins to keep the beat with you.
There is a strange feeling that follows us through life, even when we seem to have all the things we once wished for. You might notice it on quiet evenings, when everything is finally still, the bills are paid, the kitchen is clean, the lights are soft, and yet something inside you whispers, there must be more. It is not greed, not exactly. It is an ache, an almost sacred restlessness, as if the mind refuses to believe that satisfaction could ever be simple. We are taught from childhood that money is the measure of safety, that to be rich is to be free. But the odd thing is that very few people who are surrounded by abundance ever truly feel free. They are anxious about losing it, suspicious of those who want it, and haunted by the idea that it might one day stop flowing. So even when the river of wealth runs wide, they still feel thirsty. You see, money is not a thing we hold. It is a story we tell. A story about control, about certainty, about being on the right side of fate. But the story keeps changing, and we keep rewriting it. One day, you tell yourself that if you could only earn a little more, you'd finally relax. The next, you have more, and you find new ways to be tense. You upgrade the dream, not because you need to, but because you no longer know how to stop chasing. This is the subtle tragedy of modern life. You can have comfort without peace. You can have wealth without trust. You can have options and still be trapped. And you can spend your entire existence trying to feel what cannot be bought, the quiet assurance that you are already complete. It is curious that the richer a society becomes, the less satisfied its people seem to feel. We accumulate things faster than we can enjoy them. We rush to consume experiences like travelers who are afraid their passports will expire. Even leisure becomes a form of work. We must prove that we are happy, prove that we are fulfilled, prove that our success was not a mistake. And yet, the old problem persists. The feeling of lack. A man who owns a house may still lie awake worrying about losing it. A woman who finally earns her dream income may suddenly fear that it won't be enough next year. It is never the numbers in the bank that trouble us. It is the belief that we are still incomplete, that someone, somewhere, is ahead. But what does it mean to be rich? Is it to have more than others? Or is it to need less? You can only feel wealth by contrast. If everyone had $1 million, no one would feel rich. If no one had a home, even a single room would feel like a palace. Our sense of abundance is not determined by possession, but by perception, by the game of comparison we unconsciously play every day. The trouble with comparison is that it never ends. There will always be someone who has gone farther, who has achieved sooner, who seems to float through life with less friction than you. But you never see the whole story. You see the highlight reel, the house, the smile, the success, not the anxiety behind it. And so we keep reaching, we keep pushing, we keep moving the goalpost just beyond the horizon, because stopping feels dangerous, almost shameful, as though contentment were a kind of failure. But you cannot chase peace and catch it. You can only allow it. Money is the same. The more you treat it as something to trap, the faster it runs from you. Because money, like life itself, moves in cycles. It flows in, it flows out, it circulates. And when you grip it too tightly, you stop its rhythm. If you truly look, you'll notice that every major financial decision you've ever made was not just about money, it was about what money symbolized. Security, recognition, freedom, love, control. Every purchase, every job, every dream of someday was a coded way of saying, I want to feel safe. But the great paradox is that the moment you tie your safety to something that can fluctuate, you guarantee your insecurity. This is why even wealthy people rarely feel rich. They have built their peace on sand. The market shifts, the company falters, the economy trembles, and the heart trembles with it. But what if you discovered that the sense of richness you're longing for has nothing to do with the balance in your account and everything to do with your relationship to enoughness? Enough is a quiet word. It does not shout like success or sparkle like wealth. It whispers. It says, you may stop now. But the modern mind is deaf to that whisper, because stopping looks too much like losing. We have confused contentment with complacency. Yet the only way to ever feel truly rich is to recognize that you already possess the only wealth that matters, the capacity to be here now without needing the next thing to make it worthwhile. You may have noticed that the richest moments of your life were never the most expensive ones. They were the mornings when the sun touched your window at just the right angle, the laughter that cost nothing, the meal that tasted better because you had someone to share it with. These are not moments of scarcity. They are proof that wealth was never the issue. Attention was. Attention is the new currency of our age. What you give your focus to, you empower. If your attention is constantly orbiting what's missing, then even a fortune will feel fragile. But if your attention settles into what is already here, then even the simplest life will feel abundant. We often think money will finally make us present, that once the bills are gone, the debt erased, the worry silenced, then we will relax. But life has a strange sense of humor. It gives you peace the moment you stop waiting for peace to be purchased. The moment you stop making contentment conditional on external gain, you realize that freedom was never hiding in the bank. It was hiding in your breath. It is a peculiar madness to believe that the value of life depends on the size of one's savings. Yet most people spend their best years trading time, the one thing they can never recover, for figures that exist only as digital ghosts on a screen. The irony is exquisite. We sacrifice the living moment for symbols of potential moments. You do not live in the future that your money promises. You live here, in this pulse, in this breath. And when that breath is over, you cannot spend what you have stored. But the culture around us whispers endlessly, you must prepare, you must accumulate, you must secure yourself. We build whole identities on this premise. The worker becomes his salary, the entrepreneur becomes her valuation, the artist becomes the market's approval, and in the process, we forget the original reason we sought wealth in the first place, to be free to live. Freedom cannot be bought. It is a realization, not a transaction. You may have noticed that those who spend their lives chasing financial freedom rarely find it, because the chase becomes the prison. The moment they reach one target, another appears. They're like sailors who keep moving the island on the map, always rowing toward a shore that never existed. To understand this, you must first see that money is not evil, nor is it sacred. It is neutral, pure energy, pure potential. It becomes poison only when you project your fears and hopes upon it. When you treat it as the medicine for every insecurity, it amplifies the sickness. But when you treat it as a tool, a rhythm, a movement of life itself, it begins to flow naturally again. Most people do not have a money problem. They have a meaning problem. They believe that by accumulating enough, they will one day escape uncertainty. But uncertainty is not an obstacle. It is the very texture of existence. You cannot buy your way out of it. You can only dance with it. Think of the ocean. The waves rise and fall. No one wave lasts forever, yet the ocean remains whole. Money is like that. It rises and falls in the tides of your life. Some seasons bring abundance, others require trust, but both are necessary for the rhythm to stay alive. You cannot have the flow without the ebb. Yet our minds resist this natural movement. We want to lock the river in a vault. We build dams of worry, hoarding, and fear, and then we wonder why we no longer feel the joy of its movement. You might feel it too, that heavy sense that you can never rest, because if you rest, the flow will stop. But it doesn't. It only stops when you stop trusting it. There are people who have very little, yet move through life with quiet confidence. Their peace is not because they are ignorant of difficulty, but because they are intimate with it. They have learned that wealth does not guarantee security any more than poverty guarantees despair. What matters is the relationship not between you and your money, but between you and your own sense of enoughness. You may have enough and still feel poor because you have not learned to feel what you already possess. The mind is trained to seek, not to notice. It treats satisfaction as a sign to move the target farther. That is why the feeling of richness cannot arise from what you own. It arises from how deeply you allow yourself to be owned by this present moment. And that is the great secret. You cannot hold wealth, but wealth can hold you when you stop demanding that it make you feel safe. When you stop trying to make money your savior, you begin to see that life has already been carrying you all along. If you look closely, every moment of your life has been financed by something far deeper than currency, the sheer generosity of existence itself. The sunlight that costs nothing, the breath that renews itself, the people who appear when you least expect it. These are not transactions, they are testaments that abundance has always been the ground beneath your feet. The reason you never feel rich is not that you lack something material, but that you have mistaken the symbol of wealth for the experience of it. And until that illusion is seen through, you could fill every account you own and still wake in the night wondering what's missing. So, pause for a moment. Feel the air moving in and out. Notice that it does not charge rent for entry. Notice that the stars still shine whether your stocks go up or down. Notice that life, in its strange and quiet way, has never stopped providing what is essential. Perhaps that is where real richness begins, in remembering that you were never meant to feel rich by having more, but by realizing that you are already part of something that cannot be owned. At some point, we must ask ourselves what it truly means to have enough. The question sounds simple, almost childish, but it hides the key to our deepest confusion. Enough is not a number, it is a relationship. You cannot measure it with a calculator because it depends on something that cannot be counted, the quality of your awareness. You see, life has never been about accumulation. It has always been about participation. When you are fully participating in the dance of existence, wealth is irrelevant. Whether you are sitting in a palace or beneath a tree, the sense of completeness comes from the same place, the unbroken presence of consciousness itself. But when you forget that, when you identify only with the fragments you can own or display, you feel divided from life, and the divided self can never feel rich. Consider for a moment how the idea of money arose. Once, there was only exchange. A fisherman traded his catch for the farmer's grain. The potter gave a bowl for a loaf of bread. It was a rhythm of giving and receiving, balanced by trust. But as soon as we invented symbolic wealth, the symbol became more important than the exchange. The coin replaced the conversation. The note replaced the handshake. We began to value not the act of giving, but the accumulation of the tokens that represented it. And so, humanity found itself in an odd paradox. We created money to make life easier, but then made life revolve around money. We built systems that reward hoarding instead of sharing, growth instead of sufficiency, profit instead of peace. And yet the truth has not changed. You cannot take a single cent with you when you go. The wealth that truly matters is the kind you can still feel when everything else is gone. When you look around, you may notice that people often confuse abundance with excess. Abundance is the experience of fullness. Excess is the refusal to stop. Abundance nourishes, excess intoxicates. One expands your awareness, the other narrows it until you can no longer taste what you consume. A man in a small home can live abundantly if his heart is spacious. A man in a mansion can live in poverty if his soul is cramped by fear. But the problem is not greed, not really. It is confusion. We have mistaken the visible symbols of wealth for the invisible feeling of wholeness they were meant to point toward. And so we keep grasping for more, like a person trying to hold sunlight in their hands. Real richness begins the moment you stop trying to store light and start learning to see it. To feel rich is to recognize that the miracle is not that you possess things, but that things exist at all. That you are here, breathing, conscious, surrounded by textures and sounds and colors that no amount of currency could ever recreate. Look closely at the smallest details, the way the steam curls from your morning tea, the quiet rhythm of your footsteps on the floor, the warmth of someone's voice saying your name. These are not luxuries. These are wealth, but because we are taught to think of life as a ledger, we keep translating these moments into costs and gains. How much did it take? What did I earn? What did I lose? As long as the mind is caught in that arithmetic, it cannot see the truth that the value of a moment is not in what it costs, but in how deeply it is lived. You can spend your entire life chasing security and die without ever feeling safe, or you can discover here and now that safety is not the absence of risk, but the willingness to be present with it. This is why the truly wealthy are not those who have conquered uncertainty, but those who have made peace with it. They understand that life is not meant to be controlled, but experienced. The richest people in spirit are not those who hold everything tightly, but those who have learned to let everything go again and again without losing the capacity to trust. There is a freedom that appears only when you no longer demand that the world guarantee you anything. It is the freedom of being able to breathe without bargaining. The freedom of knowing that your worth does not rise and fall with the market or with the approval of others. When you realize this, something subtle shifts. The pursuit of wealth turns inward. You begin to invest, not in possessions, but in perception. You become interested in the quality of your attention, how present you are when you speak, how open you are when you listen, how generous you are when you act. That is the real portfolio of the spirit. You see, all along, life has been offering you dividends of awareness. Every challenge, every failure, every success, all of it has been teaching you how to wake up. But you cannot cash those lessons in a bank. Their value is in their transformation. And so, the question is not how to make more, but how to mean more. How to let your actions carry the weight of awareness. How to allow even the simplest gesture, a smile, a meal, a moment of silence, to become a declaration of gratitude for the wealth that is already surrounding you. People often ask, but what about ambition? Should I not strive? Of course you should strive, but know what you are striving for. There is nothing wrong with earning money, creating art, or building a company. What matters is whether your work is an expression of love or a performance of fear. When it comes from love, it expands you. When it comes from fear, it drains you. A man who works from love is not working for security. He is working because he is alive. He moves with the current of life instead of against it. He understands that what he creates is not for possession, but participation. The reward is not the result, but the doing. And when you truly work in that spirit, money ceases to be an obsession and becomes a natural byproduct of energy well spent. It flows to you not as proof of worth, but as a reflection of alignment. The difficulty, of course, is that we are surrounded by noise, a culture built on convincing us that we are always one purchase away from happiness. Every advertisement whispers the same sermon. You are not enough, but we can sell you the missing piece. And because we are tired, uncertain, and hungry for relief, we believe it. We keep feeding a hunger that cannot be satisfied, because it is not physical, it is spiritual. To be spiritually hungry is not wrong. It is the first step toward awakening. But to confuse spiritual hunger with material lack is to wander forever. The moment you understand that what you crave is not more, but meaning, everything changes. You stop trying to fill the silence with noise or the stillness with motion. You begin to see that the discomfort of not enough is simply the invitation to meet yourself more deeply. It is not a curse, but a doorway. The moment you stop running from it, it opens. To feel rich, then, is to return to that inner stillness and find that you have never truly been poor. That the wealth you sought outside was always an echo of the abundance within. You realize that your entire life has been funded by something infinite, the same mystery that animates the trees, the rivers, the stars. It is a strange discovery to make because it dissolves the game entirely. You can still earn, still build, still plan for the future, but now you do it with lightness. You are no longer trying to prove your worth, you are simply expressing it. The anxiety of comparison fades, the compulsion to outdo disappears. What remains is participation, a pure willingness to live. And when you live like that, money becomes what it was meant to be, a servant, not a master. It moves through you as easily as breath, supporting what needs to unfold, then leaving when it is time. You trust that it will return when it is needed, because you are no longer clinging to its form. You are rooted in the deeper flow beneath it, the pulse of life itself. Imagine for a moment that you were suddenly invisible to society. No one could see your possessions, your titles, or your success. What would remain of you then? That remainder, the essence that cannot be measured or marketed, that is your true wealth. Everything else is temporary. There will come a day when your last transaction is complete, your last ambition satisfied, your last coin spent. And in that moment, all that will matter is whether you have learned how to be rich in presence, whether you can meet the final silence with gratitude instead of fear. If you have lived in constant hunger for more, death will feel like theft. But if you have lived in awareness of enough, death will feel like completion. The world will always offer you reasons to worry. The market will fall, prices will rise, the future will tremble. But the one thing that cannot be shaken is the realization that wealth was never outside you. It was the consciousness through which you perceived the world. It was the gratitude that transformed necessity into blessing, repetition into ritual, ordinary life into sacredness. You are not poor because you lack things. You are poor only when you forget how to see. So, learn to see again. See the way the morning light filters through the curtain. See the faces of those you love. See the fleeting moments that slip between your plans. They are all pieces of gold scattered freely across the day. You don't have to own them, you only have to notice them. One day, you will look back and realize that the moments you thought were small were the richest of all. That the peace you chased through decades of work was already waiting for you, quietly, in the pause between breaths. To feel rich is not to escape life's uncertainty, but to bow to it. To say yes to each wave as it comes, and yes again when it goes. To know that what is yours will always find its way to you, because you are already part of the same current that carries everything else. And when that realization settles in your bones, you no longer ask, "Do I have enough?" You simply whisper, "I am enough." That is where the chase ends. That is where wealth begins.